And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection, your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. Female leaders work in an environment with multifaceted challenges, encompassing deep-seated gender biases and the persuasive influence of the glass ceiling. The interplay of unconscious biases, tokenism, and cultural and sectorial disparities further contributes to the complexity. On today's Open Connection, we bring you part 2 of the Women in Leadership discussion during this year's Nation to Nations Women's Gathering.
So I've always worked in Indigenous organizations. I started off as an intern at the Tsimshian Tribal Council and at the Friendship Center here in Prince Rupert. And my career's just kind of evolved, and I've always worked with Indigenous organizations. So my experiences are specific to those types of organizations. And I found that I've always leaned on my culture, my upbringing, the power of the women who've guided me, my mother's teachings, my auntie's teachings, my nanai's teachings, and they were all powerful, strong, opinionated, graceful women. And it's been my honor to have those women as my role models. I did not go to college or university. I did go to college, but I didn't go to college or university for management training. And so I found that my style has been modeled on those teachings from my Indigenous family, from my strong role models. And I try to bring that into the workplace and teams that I'm a new manager of. So I've been acting general sales manager for about a year, and then it was made official a couple of months ago. But I've been with this organization, CFNR, Northern Native Broadcasting, for 16 years. And I've always felt that I was a leader. Maybe if it was just for the stuff that I was doing, or just for the people that I was working with, or for the clients that I was working with, or for a select few of our staff. I've just tried hard to lead by example, and I believe that was recognized and honored to where I am in my role today. And I try to extend that to my team and my coworkers, leading with grace, leading by example, and with the strong values that I was raised with. Sometimes I have to pull open an article or take a look at managing something with that wasn't really addressed in my teachings, and I'm planning on doing some brushing up college courses or university courses, just so that I can get those additional tools as well. But my team's been great and graceful, and understands where I come from as well, and have given me that grace.
My journey has been not just in the career, but also in school. There's every meeting and every class and everything I've ever been to, I've been one of 3 women, my entire school, my entire career. So it's been very challenging coming through that. And we were talking earlier about, not having the education. I have all the education, but what that education did for me was take all of the things that I knew as a woman and try to make me forget them. Because engineers, if any of you have been in your family or you've dealt with them, they're the most square, emotionless, rigid, binary things you can think of. And it just conflicts with me as a person, as a woman. And so that's been my journey. And one of the things that I've always dwelled on is, my family, my grandparents, my mom, my great-grandparents, these women were badasses. And they didn't have the opportunities that I had. I was the only one that ever went to school, but I made sure that I made it worthwhile. And I took everything that they gave me, and the one thing I've always said to my organizations is either you support me or you're going to lose me. And that's all I can say, is that the way organizations have to deal with women is be prepared to support them, listen to them, or lose them.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. Leadership may seem glorious, fascinating, and full of prestige. However, that picture could be no further from the truth. The truth is, leadership is messy. Whether you're leading a single mom support group or a leader of your job, there's no cookie-cutter manual to get you through every situation you may encounter. Let us return the conversation with Sarah Zimmerman.
About talking about how your husband lifts you up. And I don't have one of those. I don't have a husband. I don't have a partner. I've been a single parent for a really long time. I co-parent with my two youngest kids' dad. My eldest son's dad passed away about a year ago. Cancer, it sucks, man. But walking with my 19-year-old, watching him drop everything to look after his dad, that was pretty amazing. And so my journey as a mom has been that I don't have that option to ask my husband to make dishes or do the dishes or get dinner ready or pick up the kids. I've always had to kind of navigate how I was going to do that as a parent and be a professional. So my journey started as a newspaper reporter, and back in the day where we there was beer at the office sometimes on a Friday, but at that time the newspaper industry was totally men. There was not very many women, and so I found myself one of the few women doing reporting. And you'd go to you'd submit your stories, and it was often the men that got the awards and that sort of thing. So I set little goals for myself. What do I want to do? How can I become better? I sought out mentors who could mentor me as a journalist. Some of those were naturally men, but who were willing to lift me up and help me with my skills, be there to read stories, give me suggestions for editing. When I transferred and journalism can be a pretty competitive environment. So journalists don't share sources or help one another out when they're at competing newspaper or media outlets. So when I transferred into communications 18 years ago, I expected it was going to be very competitive. And what I got was the total opposite. I joined a professional association called the Canadian Public Relations Society, and I reached out to a guy in Prince George named Kevin Brown. And Kevin's kind of famous if you've ever gone to a Kofi meeting or if you've ever gone to the Northern Resources conference. He's the guy with the bell, and he keeps everybody on schedule, and he does this thing. And he helped me with pricing, how to figure out my rates, how to invoice, how to keep track of my hours. He got me my first job. He mentored me in a really meaningful way. And at that point, it was mostly men in that industry. It was probably 30% women in 2007 when I went into this business. And today, our whole profession has really switched, and it's inverse now. There's probably about 70% women and 30% men coming up in this industry. So that's an interesting observation, but it's because people supported me as a young person. But what companies can do to accommodate people like me who don't have a partner, whether I'm a man or a woman, is finding ways to make things easier. And when I worked at Coast Mountain College, we had a president at the time. It was Ken Burt, and he was, an older guy. And he observed that I was late quite often for our president's council meeting. I'd roll in at 9:15 because I was dropping my kids off, and I'm late for everything except for today. I was on time. But he pulled me aside one day and he said, "Sarah, would it be easier if we started our president's council meetings at 9:30 so you can get your kids to school?" And it was the first time somebody offered me something that was an actual accommodation. It wasn't a reflection. It wasn't chastising me for being late. It was, I can see that you need this support. Let's change what we do so that you can participate fully at the executive table. So those are meaningful things. those are meaningful things that people can do to accommodate women, single parents, in leadership positions, for sure.
I'm the kind of person that if somebody says you can't do that, I'm like, I'll put the mic down and let's go, right? So, I mean, I look at a recent experience. I can't say that my career is being, roadblocked by gender bias, to be honest. I feel like I was born into a family that was like, you are a young woman in the 80s growing up, you can do anything you want. Because my parents, my moms, were part of the feminist movement. And my dad was a feminist, and my grandfather was a feminist. And like, they encouraged me to do anything I wanted to put my mind to. So I kind of grew up with this idea that if you do good work and you work extra hard and you put your mind to something, that you can do it. And so when I found myself in mostly male-dominated environments, I worked at Rio Tinto for 5 years during the modernization project, and my very first management meeting, it was me and like 27 guys. And I was like, okay, this is a different environment. But I always learned how to adapt myself, I guess, to the environment that I was in. I put my name forward to seek a seat on city council. And Terrace City Council's always had 1 or 2 women for a really long time. And 15 people put their hands up for 6 seats. So there was a lot of people looking for the 6 seats at the table.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. The decision to reconsider your career path is not an admission of failure. Rather, it's an act of courage and self-awareness. Recognizing that your dream job isn't giving you a satisfaction or fulfillment you expected is a critical step in understanding yourself and your true aspirations. Let us return to the conversation with Carmine Hedren.
Okay, can you share a personal experience where gender bias or stereotypes affected your leadership journey, and how did you overcome them? Let's start with Carmine.
I had the dream job. I had a job. I was making the disgusting amount of money in my 30s, way too much than I should have, and making stupid decisions and living a life that I was feeling guilty for. And I knew that I was set up. I had the golden handcuffs, if they call them. But I wasn't happy. I was desperately in the closet. I was trying to change my life, and I couldn't. So I left. I left the job. I quit. I sold everything I owned, and I left the country. And I went down to Arizona, where I had been it as a child, and I was able to have the room to grow, because I was put in that box of, you're a manager, or you make good money. I wasn't a manager at that time, but it's like my path was determined for me. And I don't like anybody to tell me what to do, ever. If you tell me what to do, I will do the opposite. So, and I've always said, like, you don't dictate my career, I do. And so I chose that, and I left. And it was hard. I took a massive salary cut. And I did it with intention, because I knew that I had to prove to myself and get myself back, because I was them. I was doing what they wanted. I was fulfilling their needs, and I needed to find mine. And it was great. I ended up meeting my best friend from when I was a kid, and we ended up getting married, and it was amazing. And the second time that it happened was the inverse. It was I can tell you the date. It was November 9th, 2016. And if anyone knows what that date means, that's the date that Trump was elected. So I was in South Carolina, married to a woman, as a female engineer, working in a Google construction site. So I made the decision that day. Actually, my wife said, let's go to Canada. So I came back, and I was ready, because I had gone out. I had given myself the space, the time, and to build the confidence to just come back and be a better version of myself. So that's really what I would say of fighting those stereotypes. You don't have to be it.
And for some of the roles actually that I've taken on since then, including the boards, CFNR, Northern Native Broadcasting, several years ago was heavily Indigenous or male-dominated in the management roles at the station. And there was a shift, and I was now the acting general sales manager, and then now promoted to the general sales manager position. The staff at CFNR is amazing, and we've been solely recruiting amazing women, including my good friend and colleague Shanine, who's now the program director and morning show host. She's been, as she mentioned, with us for 3 months, and we've recently hired many more amazing people. And you had talked about it being about 80% women now where we work. It wasn't like that a few years ago, so now I'm the new general sales manager, and so there was a kind of a culture shift at the station, and I feel like it's been really amazing and healthy, and it's just been I feel supported, and I'm really proud of the women that we've brought on, including Shanine.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
The full quote from Harry Selfridge is, "The customer is always right in the matters of taste," which means that if they want to buy an ugly hat, let them. They're still buying it. It doesn't mean they're always right, though. In this final segment of Open Connection, Michelle McNeil shares what happens when the customer asks to see the manager.
Raised up in my career in a very male-dominated industry. I was a branch manager over the course of almost 10 years for a couple different financial institutions, and still get that thing of when you've got somebody demanding to speak to the manager, and then I show up, and they're like, "Is there not a man I can talk to?" You can talk to me. So that's just kind of a very obvious one that still definitely exists in the community. As far as the industry itself goes, it is very heavily weighted in favor of women. When you start to get up into the senior leadership ranks, however, the dynamics they've shifted, but they're on their way, I guess. I really kind of want to speak more to maybe that stereotyping piece. So I am going to now disclose my age. So I'll be 58 next month. And, thank you. Really. So, it's funny, I've been working with an EQ coach recently, and I was talking about, leading a really diverse team, from perspectives and age and different generations, like a multi-generational team, and I realized through my conversations with her that I'm also struggling with aging in the workplace because I'm starting to age out, not internally at all, but what that number says when I remind people what it is. And the other thing is, I started back in the day when my first marriage, got married young, followed my former partner around the province for 20 years and stoked up his career and just kind of worked in banks wherever we lived. I received many credentials and many roles through the banking system, but I'm not a credentialed person with a university degree. So it's one of those, what I've built, I've worked really hard to build myself, but now I find myself being that late 50s, not credentialed, but with experience that would be very valuable for anybody to have me walk in the door. So then when I'm looking for new opportunities or looking to have deeper opportunities in the organization that I'm with, I'm up against younger credentialed people. I'm up against the job descriptions that say you need to have this particular set of, a BA of something behind your name, or equivalent experience and education, but except that that phrase really doesn't mean a whole lot. So I'm really encouraging anybody out here who's looking for people that there's a lot of power in those of us who have raised ourselves up in our respective industries. We've built our capacities. I'm a lifelong learner. There is not a time I do not have a book in my hand, or I'm in a webinar, whether it's for business purposes or just to better understand the communities that I live and serve in. So as hiring managers or people who are looking to fill leadership roles within their organization, look to the people. Don't just look at what they've got on a piece of paper, but really understand what they could bring to and enhance your organization. So that's something that I definitely am experiencing.
You know, as women, as aunties, life givers, and, you know, all that, we do understand that not only do we have a professional career, but we have families, we have elderly parents, we have, you know, volunteerism, boards that we sit on, managing your household, booking your kids' dentist appointments, making sure they have clean underwear for Monday morning, like making sure your kids have groceries. Like, it's a lot of work being a woman, and our minds are always going, right? And you're like, oh, I better remember this. I gotta do this, this, and that. And my husband is really great. I'm grateful for him. He's a very good person. But when we go to bed, he's out in 30 seconds. I'm not. You know, I'm thinking, okay, all this stuff I have to do tomorrow. And I know as women, we all can relate to that. You know, that's just how it is. But, you know, it's that making space. And that's a great story for men that are in leadership roles. At CFNR, we're about 80% First Nations women there. And we have a couple of men that are there. And, you know, as First Nations women, I feel that strength. I've never had a job where I'm the majority. You know what I mean? So it's awesome. And I just want to mention, though, as well, like, you know, it's good to have allies with us and people that are women from other communities that walk in different communities. But for visibly First Nations women, not only do we have to be smarter and better and quicker and more educated and more on the top of the game, because there's those unspoken of things that we face as First Nations women when we're in entry level or leadership roles that we have to navigate it even more, and we have to, you know, always be ahead of the game. And I don't think that's something that our non-Indigenous community doesn't always understand, doesn't always maybe think of, because there's things, you know, that are just still present, like entitlements, and, you know, even if they don't mean to be, but there's a lot of ignorance, and we're facing that as First Nations women. So I just wanted to say, not only is it hard being a woman, when you're a First Nations woman in this country where there is thousands of missing or murdered women just like us, we are literally the most abused in this country, but yet we're still here and making it, right? So, and breaking down those barriers.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.